So, of course, this is supposed to be a screencast about Git and GitHub. And there's a lot of different ways and means to really leverage GitHub. They aren't the same thing. RStudio, so much in the way that RStudio is kind of a front end, a visual front end for working with the R language. GitHub is a visual front end for working with Git repositories and managing these organizations, in addition to the complexities of the different versions that can occur. And one of the key things over here is this idea of issues that give you an interaction mechanism with the rest of your community, and the ability to reference other issues, other pull requests, create milestones regarding certain features and how far have they actually progressed, and of course, speaking about commits one by one. So over here, actually, one second, I'm going to one second here. All right, now that we have some music, we are good to go. And so let's kind of jump into this. Of course, if you haven't already, which makes the other videos a little bit difficult to work with, you need to be granted access to this mixtures repository, and you need to fork it in your own account. If you've already forked it, then it'll just go to your fork. And there's a couple of different things here. In the main mixtures repository, we already have tabs open for issues and pull requests, which we'll want to talk about. There's also a list of all the different branches that you can easily go to, and you can easily go to and click on each one to let's find. Well, regardless, you can go to a specific branch, look at all of the commits that are there, and take that SHA-1 hash that you want, or go ahead and go back to a point in history and look at individual files by clicking this button over here. As always, if you can, put those less than 80 character summary taglines at the top, and add in some description whenever you do commit. Now, one thing that you need to do in your fork, because this isn't the default behavior, is everybody else who's forked or otherwise interacted with this is listed under Manage Access, where there's 11 different contributors that are all here. But in order to actually grant anybody access to any of these, you need to click the box to let them see your fork. Now, the other key component is you need to, or this is going to kind of be up to everybody else. If you make issues in the main repo here, you can see, everyone else can see everybody else's stuff. On the other hand, you might want to create issues inside of your own repository that help you kind of keep track of what you're doing and why. And of course, if you've added other people to your repository, or those other collaborators have been granted access, like we just showed, they can also create issues and ask questions. And that's the primary way that GitHub has kind of organized this. Furthermore, we might want to add in pull requests. And here's an example pull request that I started a while back, but we've left open for the purposes of an example. So what happens is you can kind of copy these links and figure out where everything is. It'll list which branch you were on. Now, why is it not added? Why is it not added that? And you can let me actually construct a new example to show how this can kind of work instead. One moment. Okay, so what we've actually done, recording, yes I am. All right. So what I've actually done is I've created this example documentation.md file with some exposition, some details about the code, some build instructions, right? And maybe I've added this recursively, and we can pop out of this. By the way, something I want to mention in brief detail is you can do git config credential.helper you can set this credential helper to cache your username info in order to avoid rewriting this all the time. And in particular, it's git config credential.helper cache, and you can provide a timeout in seconds. So there's some number of seconds in a day. Like let's just say I want it to not ask me my password again for 3 hours, or is that 12 hours or whatever? No, that's 60 seconds in a minute. That's 10 minutes. For example, if you're using SSH keys, you need to have something installed. Typically, it can be called by SSH agent, and it'll say that it's running somewhere. On Debian, this is going to be keychain. This package will provide you stuff, and in particular, you can type in SSH add to have that SSH agent keep track of the passwords for your login session, so you don't have to keep typing it in every time. Okay, so we've changed and edited this documentation MD file, and we've done it inside of a Git tutorial branch. Of course, if we git log to look at what's going on here, it's at more or less the same point as the main mixtures repository, because I've updated what's going on at my origin, which is my fork on GitHub, my copy or clone that I've developed. Now, and of course, I've said don't actually merge this. So what's going on is GitHub, when you're looking at your own remote or your GitHub fork, it will automatically keep track of recent branches that you've been pushing, and it will give you an option to just go ahead and make a pull request. Now, a pull request, first let's make some issues. I want to switch over to my Git tutorial branch, and I want to start adding some issues. And there's a number of different ways to approach this. Like, let's say I created a project that was updating documentation. I don't need a description for that. You can choose a template based on some different styles of basically tracking what's going on inside of a Trello board. And you can add cards and reference those cards depending on what people have listed as issues or problems in your code. Let's go ahead and create a new issue. And you can assign people to issues. Since I'm in my own repository, I'll go ahead and assign myself. And, oh man, what song is this? I love this song. Okay. And we can also add some issues. So for example, I might want to say for this issue, there's a bug, I want to improve the documentation, and I want help on it. Maybe I have a question to ask as well. So we'll go ahead and do that. We can assign this to the project where we're actually keeping track of all of these things. Okay. And it's added it to this project, so now I can cross-reference the issues between those projects where I'm keeping track of the cards, and also make references to statements that are in that project in an issue. And we might you can create milestones that basically say, okay, maybe for milestone release version 1.1, I want to have these things, and I'll assign different projects into those milestones. So after I start marking projects as complete, or I link issues to cards inside of projects, as soon as this issue is marked resolved, it will automatically check off that check mark box. And as you can probably guess, a lot of this has kind of been automated out. So when I start doing git commit, I can actually just reference the issue that I'm fixing, and it'll close the issue, which will then start to trigger the culmination of these effects. So from there, though, I want to say documentation doesn't capture behavior of a file, right? And I can submit, and these are all styled with Markdown. So you can include some to-do lists, you can @ people, reference another issue, and it'll give you a hashtag, and you basically type in the number of that issue. And you can reply to replies if there's replies that you saved over in another issue or something like that. But what I want to do is I might say documentation on line 328 of documentation.md leads me to believe that a function our example function, just call it example, accepts an X and does like return X or rnorm 100 samples from a standard distribution. And include that as an example, will behave like will return a R object which generates a 100 samples from a standard distribution, right? However, line 328 is blah, and at this point, let's go ahead and pop over. Let's pop back over to these changes that we've made. That's the wrong thing. I want to go to this branch, and I want this documentation.md. And where is it? Let's say I want the raw. No, that's that. Sometimes it really only does this for scripts. Yeah. So when I have code that pops up that isn't Markdown, it will render it differently. And I can actually go in here and say no. let's say I want this function just as an example. I click at the start, I click at the end, and then it gives, and shift click at the end, and it gives me this little pop-up where I can either copy the lines and add those however the function behaves, like so, and I can just copy and paste, and maybe I want to format it using markdown syntax. We can preview that. It'll do all the highlighting, but maybe I want something a little bit better. What we can do is we can just copy the permalink, and this permalink will keep track of what branch we're in, what file we're looking at, and what lines we've actually selected, right? Copy the permalink. As you can see, it actually mentions a specific commit, so I know exactly at what point in the history these things were actually being talked about, and what branch that's associated with, because a branch has a ledger of commits. Each commit has a unique ID. And instead, I can do this, which when we preview it, will give me a pop-up saying exactly what lines inside of what commit, and so on and so forth. So the documentation, let's see if I really want that documentation file to capture what I'm talking about. If I go back, oh, come on. Well, as you can see, it works for code. So the documentation should be updated at that line. And now, people can come in, they can say, hey, didn't we fix this in commit in this commit? And all you need to do is actually copy and paste that first 7 digits, and it will auto-link the commit, so you can find out what was actually going on. And it's always helpful, once again, to leave put the 80 character header and then write out some explanation of what you did below, because it'll pop up here. We'll leave that as a comment. Now, of course, we can actually pick some column, or we can create columns inside of this project to actually assign this to, and go from there. We can also transfer this issue to somebody else's repository, and that includes the main mixtures repository in this case. But what I also want to show you is updating documentation, new behavior or something, and we can assign some people, and we can just say enhancement, and for giggles we'll mark this as a duplicate as well. Projects, add it to this project, make it go away, okay. And it's saying, oh, hey, by the way, we're talking about the documentation about new behavior it might be similar to an issue that already exists that somebody has written down. So we'll leave it like that. And I can say I added new behavior, which was documented in commit we'll say here, and I can pick any commit, right? Or it's reported from git status or git log inside of the terminal or what have you. And I can paste the full thing to, it'll still shorten and auto link it, but this hasn't made it into documentation.md file or something to that effect. I can submit that new issue, and I can now go back and reference all these things, and I can say, hey, this is a problem over in issue 1. And as soon as I type that hashtag, it'll go ahead and pop up some references for me to talk about. And at that point, we can also acknowledge that pull requests are technically counted as issues. So this is how you reference pull requests, or if you're in a pull request, reference another issue that someone created. And we can comment and leave it open. Now, the other thing that we have going on is, okay, one second. So the other thing that we have going on is, because we're over in a fork, which is a different copy of the main repo, we might have a new feature that we've developed in another in another branch, and we want to send that to the main repo that we forked from, where we can hit compare and pull request, and we can assign people to ourselves, or let's say I assign myself to it, or you can assign someone else, and you can request a review. That is a code review from anybody else here. So let's say I'm not going to request a review right now from anybody. And we can add some labels once again to this. We can say, I don't want that open right now. We can say this is an enhancement, and we have some questions. Maybe there were some bugs that we fixed too, right? The interesting thing is that when we're choosing which of these, so you can select which branch you want to target for one, and it'll automatically tell you if these can be merged or not. Of course, if there's some sort of conflict, it'll let you know, and we covered that in a separate video. So you'll have to go back and take the target branch. Let's say there was another branch that was added. Of course, you can also reference the tags. that you can create on the Git command line. It's the same thing. So if you had a tag for a specific version release, you might want to use that. But if there was like a documentation feature branch, right, that existed up over here, you could choose to target that and then let someone else merge anything that's going on inside of that feature branch into the master one. So this is the branch we're targeting. This is the repository we're sending it to. And any of the other repositories that I have access to, I can also send to and choose one of their branches. And if I have multiple people all collaborating via these different forks or these different copies inside of GitHub, I can also say, this maybe whatever I'm adding is going to be good for multiple forks, so I can write some code and then send a pull request across all of those forks, and I can make sure that almost everybody is able to merge this, right? So I can compare across forks here, and kind of check the mergeability, depending on who I want to target for all of this. And you know what? Can I just send that to myself? Interesting. Okay, so we're going to send this pull request to myself is what we're going to do. And I'll add some reviewers. It's not going to let me. Okay, whatever. I'll assign myself to it. Cool, great, wonderful. And it'll look up the projects that are inside of the targeted repo. So you can, if there's projects already there, you can say, hey, this pull request is targeted at this project, and it'll auto-link all of those things together. And same goes for milestones, but there's no, I don't know how to create those yet. And down here, right, it'll provide some summary information to actually let you know what was going on. If there were comments on a commit, which, we can actually do. If I go to this commit, I might, there it is. I might highlight somewhat. I might add a comment at a specific line saying, hey, this wording isn't clear at all. Doesn't this cause a buffer overflow or something? Yada, yada, yada. Add comments, people can reply to it. And I guess I'll do that, and I'll reply, no, what are you talking about? What do you mean? Please reference issue number 1. And, I can react with emojis to approve or disapprove. And of course, you can link it all together and quote a reply. And you generate quotes in Markdown with a little right arrow key to do that. Yes. And then on the full commit itself, I can say this is probably good and probably closes number 3 or something like that, right? Oh, snap. Okay, whatever. We'll go with that. Yeah. All right. So back to our main pull request here. The same sort of tools exist, and you'll get a list of all files. If you are editing a file that's already there, it'll show the old version on the left and what was deleted in red, and it'll show what was on the right and what was added in green. And if you do linked issues, you can add closing keywords in order to adjust those. Let's see. Issues number 1 and number 2, for example, to reference my issues that exist inside of the base repository that I'm targeting. And once again, in most cases, you're actually going to be targeting here, and maybe and maybe there's a specific branch that you want to send what you've done over here to. But once again, we're just going to send it to ourselves to make sure it stays the same. And each time you re-click that, it undoes everything. Come on. All right, whatever. And you can change the closing keywords to make sure that, open issues, when you make a commit, will actually just automatically close those issues. And it tells us, hey, by the way, there's comments inside these commits you might want to go read to figure out, what the conversation was around different components of the commits that were there. And you can highlight lines and presumably do stuff. I think you can create a comment. Alright, so typically there's a way to link the lines from down here. No? Okay. You can sometimes reference those lines in the pull request. I don't remember how to do that, but let's create the pull request. So here we are, and at this point, we can see how many commits, we can view the conversation as it's evolved, we can see what files got changed, and it'll give us some nice little summary demographics of what was actually all going on there. Why can't I add myself? It's not letting me do that. Now, something that you can also try to build and run code automatically to make sure that it passes build checks. It shouldn't be important for this group. Why won't it let me? Hold on 1 second. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're actually going to submit the full pull request to to the main repository to see if we can get this review thing to show up. Okay, now where is the start my review button? Oh god, that's where it is? Okay, so here's the pull request, and you need to go over to the Files Changed tab. And once again, you know, it lists all the commits, it'll show you the conversation flow, and as you scroll towards the bottom, you can, one person needs to review this because the main repo is subject only to one reviewer, and it also gives you command line instructions for merging the pull request or blocking it in the event that you just want to do it from the command line automatically. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over to Files Changed. And here is where things can get interesting and where you can actually start a code review. So I can jump to different files and see what got added, what got changed, and start reviewing those one by one. You know, if I want to only look at code, maybe I only select .r files. And changes from all commits, I can show all of the commits and select which commit in that ledger history I actually want to go to first and still even do a review there and view how things changed over time. Of course, once you view one file, you can mark it viewed, and it has a little counter that tells you everything goes away. And you can hide it and just go one by one for your code review. Now, to actually start a full review, you click Review Changes. Well, first, as I'm reviewing this, I'm kind of like, okay, I want... No, stop that. I want to highlight all of this. I want to say, hey, this line is kind of wordy and has some issues. Well, first, as you can see, we can just start a review instantaneously by going to the file, highlighting somewhere, and this is click to drag across multiple files or multiple lines. So everyone knows exactly what you're referencing. But let's start the review proper from up here. Oh, no, I can't do that. Yep, so highlight. These paragraphs are too wordy. Consider changing to blah, 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 blah. Or replace with actual code like x equals none, y equals none, print x plus y, which should be none, but you know, screw it. And we'll start a review. And this automatically highlights and shows a conversation per different lines, and multiple people can view and react to this, and you can reference these different things. And then down here, maybe I want to, hey, was this actually reworded correctly after taking issue number? And this, since this is a pull request to a target repository, the main one on GitHub, it's using all of it's using all of the issues and pull requests that actually exist over there. So let's say 36. Just for funsies. And the fun thing, right, is that as soon as you mention one of these, it will if the issue is open, it will say oh my goodness. If you reopen the issue, it will automatically pop up a conversation stream saying, hey, by the way, this issue was referenced by pull request number 39. And of course, I can say, no, actually, we discussed this change in pull request number 38 or something, and we can link in that whole conversation to make sure that we keep track. And I can say did you do this right? And reference different individuals. And hey, it says who does what. So from there, I might consider this more or less reviewed. You might want to break these up line by line. This code review process or this review process was definitely meant to what does this do? Yes. The split version will show you the old next to the new. Exactly like the git merge tool and git diff stuff that we used earlier. You can hide white space changes. So now that that's kind of reviewed, I added comments requesting word fixes. You can, if you are the person who manages actually merging together these branches, you can just approve it from here and submit the review, or you can say, no, I don't want to change this yet, and I want to request changes from you before I actually pull this in. And I'll add that comment. And of course, for me, I might have questions about specific lines and asking if this is okay or not. And as you can see, after this has been reviewed, people can comment, yes, this is appropriately fixed, comment, and resolve the conversation. And just say, hey, that's fine. Now for this other area, what I can do is I can say, hey, you know what? That really is an issue that I need to keep track of and change. So once these reviews have been added, you click the button over here, reference in a new issue, and I want it to go into my mixtures repository, and I'm going to create that issue, and it'll automatically bounce me over here to the issues for the main repo. And I can copy this issue after it's been assigned to a project or a milestone, and it's assigned to myself, that will replicate into my fork. So now we'll close the issue, but that's a way you can keep track of that, and you can link it to a project if those are there, in addition to milestones that need to be accomplished. So you can just go to the project or the milestone to actually figure out what is going on. And now from here, this is now referenced as number 40. So I can go back and say, yes, this has been fixed in number 40. And so on and so forth. And finally, to leave comments keeping track of the whole process, I can add another comment here saying, hey, is this ready? Comment. And it'll add it to the stream. And now, you know, I kind of want to actually keep track of what's going on. And I might say, okay, I want to incorporate some of these fixes. So here's what we're going to do is we'll hold on to this, and you'll recall in my own repository over here, I'm keeping track of issues, and these issues are still open. And maybe I want to, you know, go ahead and close out those issues. And we'll go to projects, get tutorial, mixtures, get status, get fetch to double make sure, and get pull to pull in any new changes that have occurred. And from there, I might say, oh yeah, you know what, this issue number 2, I actually do need to address. And I can go ahead and edit documentation.md, and what line is that? Oh, some line. And over here, I might say, yeah, you know what, I'm going to reword this. I'll just delete it. Here are key details about the code. And we'll write that out. We'll close it. We'll go back to the terminal, get status, and keep in mind, our pull request is still open, which means that as we make changes and commits to this branch that we've asked to be merged, those new edits and new commits will make their way automatically into the pull request in order to address the issues that have come up. So I might git commit-am fixed number 2, or I want to say directly close number 2, update documentation details, or update code details. And I'll push that out. And it's automatically started to update. If I actually go over, well, what issue did I name that? There's no open issues. Apparently this has auto-linked since it's a branch already open in a pull request, auto-linked the target repository's issues, so you can reference them that way. If I go back over here to my issues, We can see I've referenced this issue inside of a pull request from when I tried to merge into myself. And normally, if I don't already have a pull request open, it will automatically close this issue. But sometimes the auto linking goes too far. So now we closed issue number 2. We might go back into the pull request and resolve this. And like I said, if we kept track of the auto linking right, maybe we should have typed number 40 here over instead, and it would have automatically closed this issue. And that's about that. If we go back over into pull requests, here's a, oh God, what time am I on? Okay, not too bad. Here's an open pull request where I made some changes and some fixes addressing individual issues. So as you can see, I created some issues in the main repository, and then as I made commits, it went ahead and auto-closed these issues that were inside of the main repository. Where everyone has access, people can be assigned to it, and they can be linked to effectively Trello cards or milestones that track versions based on tags, which we've talked about before. And you can make more comments, reopen issues, ask questions, all that good jazz. Anybody who is assigned to it will be subscribed to it, and they'll get an email or something about it, right? Or it'll show up over here in your notifications. Now, as we can see, Audrey has already gone through and commented and added based on highlights that I performed in specific word-by-word locations. I don't remember how I did that, but I did it somehow for sure. I think I must have, if I go to files changed, why will you not agree with me? Oh, I'm sorry, that bolded highlight is the diff. Clearly this is the part that got deleted, and this is the part that's there. Maybe it might be more helpful for us to look at this in a split view. And here we go. Here's the old, here's the new, and you can make comments in particular locations and make a comment over in the old version to ask, like, hey, why is this worded that way? Or something to that effect, and start a new review, or add it to your review that you already have going on. Yes, I want to discard those changes. And this is just a real quick, easy way of seeing what got added, what got removed. And some of these actually look like they're fine. So we'll resolve that conversation. We can go back and say, oh, I actually wanted to see what they said there in order to, provide additional feedback if I was a third person, and so on and so forth. Each one of these changes, I might want to say here, this was fixed in, what commit was that? I don't want that. I want this. This was fixed in, I don't know, I think it was, oh, no, it was this one. And I might reference the commit, add the single comment, yada yada. Sometimes the automation tools for the build test or the build checks when you submit a pull request will kind of automatically pick up these lines, and you know you'll want to go in there and make comments and so on. And so this is automatically gzipped, coming out the other side. Resolve that conversation, and there we go. So this is fully reviewed. I'll mark it as done. There's nothing else for me to look at there. Review changes. Rates. I can submit a new review. If I go back to the conversation, we can see the timeline here and any other references and other issues that were occurring. And so on and so forth. So hopefully this is a useful tool for you to use. Let's double check. Was there anything else? Yeah, there's so much more to GitHub, and actually keeping track of all these different things. And if people are added to an organization in particular, you can still mark things as hidden, but anyone added to that organization can kind of like automatically look at things, and you can set the permissions inside of the organization to say, oh, only this person can actually merge, and so on and so forth. And you can sort through the issues that way. Maybe I want to see what's actually been assigned to me, and you can also just search. If you know that you have multiple projects going on and you just kind of log in one day and you're like, oh man, what am I going to work on? I know it's 9 a.m. I need to do something. You can search for is open, is issue, and I was assigned. It is a great way to kind of jump through that sometimes. And of course, when you follow each other, if there's been recent activity, it'll pop up at the top of your feed. And some of that fun stuff. I forgot to mention. You can do this. You can also add an individual, you can add a file. And you can type out example code here and it'll automatically highlight some of those. Let's create a secret disk. So let's create a secret gist here. Leave some comments on it, and I want to copy this gist, the URL to it, and maybe I go back over to my open and assigned issues. No, go away. Oh, there's a back to GitHub button. If I go to my issues and I look at what I was assigned and I type out a code description to fix or add to a conversation, I should be able to just link the gist. And I can say, hey, here's some example code you might want to look at. That was just kind of typed out, or maybe I did it on my local machine and just copied and pasted to kind of show as an example what's going on. I can pin issues. What does pin an issue do? So if I have a really big important thing, I can put a pin in it and it goes to the top and everyone can see it. What happens when I transfer an issue? Oh, these are all, okay. I can move issues to another repository that I have control over, and so on and so forth. Okay, I think that about captures that. So hopefully this is a useful tool that we can use for our code reviews going into the future. And there's stuff you can create markdown formatted wikis that actually explain everything. You can add these automated, like if this then that style actions, view stuff, and for each one of your repositories, you can set the policy for who can report those apparently, and over in settings for a repository, change how you do notifications, look at the branches. You can rename something if you want a different branch, and you can set that as the main branch. So if you wanted to rename master to main, this is a way to do it. And for different branches, I might want to add a rule that requires a pull request review from at least like 2 people. And I'll dismiss stale pull request approvals. And so if someone does a pull request and then I make some changes, it will remove their approval after I add those changes and re-ask them. Maybe you want to require signed commits, and if this is unchecked, no one can force push. That's a good thing. You don't want this enabled, and you may or may not want allow deletions there. And you should be able to change who can push to which branch. I don't remember how that works, but there's a way to do it, I think. So under manage access, direct access, invite a collaborator. You can invite people to your fork. What happens when I do this? Oh yeah, I don't want to do anything with that. And there's integrations, so OneDrive, Slack, everything. I can directly mention issues and create issues from Slack if I wanted to, but that's just a lot. And I can configure my own auto link references. So for example, whenever we do like hashtag and then the number of an issue, right? It will auto link to say GitHub. If I do hashtag main, pull request or commit. I can probably set this up so that this will only ever mention reference, or this will only ever create mention references like, I might do main 37 or something. And instead I want it to only create issues over here. And I don't remember what the exact query string was for all of this, but it was like ticket and equal something. I don't know. That's how you add autolink references. Yep, okay. That's about it. Thanks for watching. Hope this was useful.